welcome to the It's a Record Time podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and this is the show where each week I'm joined by different guests to talk about their favourite albums, biggest influences, and the bands that they love. This week I was joined by Ben Gallaty, bassist for folk punk legends AJJ. Ben was an absolutely great guest. He shared some incredible albums, and he's just a real pleasure to hang out with in general. We talked about classic albums that I haven't listened to, spotting Scott Weiland at an airport, and the 1995 teen comedy film Angus. Formed in 2004, AJJ have released 7 studio albums, a bunch of EPs, loads of splits, and a few live albums as well. I recently picked up their Live at Third Man Records live album on vinyl, which is extremely good, and I recommend picking that up if you're into vinyl, and if you're not, I think you can probably listen to it on Spotify and stuff, so go and do that. I've listed all the albums that we spoke about in show notes, as well as links to AJJ socials and their Patreon and all of that stuff as well. I'm going to be back at the end for a little bit more chat, but until then, enjoy! Awesome. So, how are you?
Oh, I'm all things. I'm, doing really good, doing really bad, and everything in between. So yeah, it's a weird time. I look forward to being on the other end of it.
Yeah, it almost feels like a bit of a sort of trick question at this stage, asking people how they are.
Well, you forget, that, and I've certainly been in countries where they take that question seriously, whereas it's just kind of a, just a polite thing. How's it going? How are you doing? But yeah, so nowadays it's kind of like, oh man, you just kind of have to think on it for a little while. But yeah, I'm doing pretty well considering. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad actually. It's sort of about 8 o'clock at night here. It's a weird one. So I'm in London. I'm in the UK at the moment, and we're having a slightly weird day that we've all been locked down again for the last 2 months. But we had our big announcement today about here's the dates where you can go back outside, and here's the date where nightclubs are going to be open again, and here's the date where the world's going to be back to normal. So it's all sort of, it feels incredibly optimistic. As like an announcement, but we've already started all of our plans about which pubs we're going to first.
Yeah. It seems kind of dangerous. Certainly, there's been waves of optimism and pessimism throughout the year. We initially postponed, we had shows this time 1 year ago planned and, postponed them, figured surely by fall 2020, things would be back to normal and clubs would be open again. And then postponed those again, and then eventually just canceled the plans, which is actually kind of nice just to be like, okay, rather than worrying about when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen, just like not having that looming and just being like, clear everything off the schedule and we'll get back to it one of these days, not have to worry about it in the meantime.
So presumably you haven't played a show in the best part of 12 months now then?
Yeah, that's true. Sean, my bandmate, and I, we did a live stream thing. So we have like a little, like a practice space that, so we masked up and, they're being super duper careful over at their house as far as their tiny pod. And, so we're also being very careful when we're near one another, but we were able to do a live stream and it was really fun to play music with somebody else. But yeah, like a show. It's been fully 12 months. We were gearing up to do a lot of touring last year because we put out an album and then we did a little bit of touring and then everything just got canceled. So look forward to getting back to it one of these days.
So the album came out all the way back in January 2020, which feels like an extremely long time ago.
Yeah.
More so than sort of a year normally would, I think. And it's your 7th album as AJJ, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, 7th full length, and so we've been around for a bit.
It's an interesting album in that it's clearly about it's an album for a election year. It's called Good Luck Everybody. And then suddenly it takes on this second meaning almost.
Yeah. It we're sorry everybody that we jinxed us, and our album led to this pandemic. So yeah, it was painfully appropriate.
So it's the first one that you released on your own label as well. It's on AJJ Unlimited Limited.
Yeah, that's right. So we'd put stuff out. I mean, when we first started as a band, just out of necessity, we would release things ourselves. But yes, since we've worked with labels, this is the first thing that we put out, first full-length album that we've put out. And it was fun. Yeah, it was a nice exercise, in certain ways. It was cool to have the ability to make all the decisions ourselves, and then in some ways, it's a little overwhelming making all the decisions ourselves, but altogether we're really happy with how it came out. Yeah, not sure what we're going to do next, but we certainly have that as an option. We've gone through it all, and I think we would do it even better the next time around since we've learned a few lessons.
So what was the impetus for going, we're going to go self-published for the first time in a while then?
Yeah, that's a good question. We ended up recording it ourselves just kind of because we had access to this space, and we had, Sean had some songs that we were working on, and so it just kind of seemed like the natural progression of that. I mean, we sent it around, we shared it with some folks, but it was just one of those things where it's like, there were some labels that would have put it out, but we also, thought it might be fun to try to do it ourselves, and figured we were up to the task, and I'm glad we did it ourselves. But yeah, it has a lot to do with finding the right person to work with, and certain record labels do what we did, like some record labels order the record from the record plant, and then they ship them to you, and not necessarily doing a lot in addition to that. Then of course a lot of labels get really involved, and have radio campaigns and publicity campaigns and all that kind of stuff, which can be helpful, but oftentimes you end up paying for that at the end, one way or the other. So yeah, just figured we would just pay for whatever stuff like that we wanted to do, and yeah, I think it worked out pretty well. It was a fun exercise. Yeah, I would do it again, but also we might team up with a label that's really excited about what we're doing next and be able to offer us something really useful, but time will tell.
On that, we might team up with a label and, with what's coming next. Have you started thinking about what's coming next?
Yeah, definitely thought about it. And we've actually been working on material as well. We've gotten to a point where, I'd mentioned that we recorded the last one ourselves. So we invested in a little bit of equipment, and like I said, we have a little space that we can record. And then we can, nowadays you can send things around, and we have collaborators, like the main part of the band, there's Sean and I. We founded the band back in 2004, and then longtime collaborators, Owen Evans, Preston Bryant, Mark Click. So that would be, I guess a few of those people play multiple instruments, but yeah, those are folks that we've collaborated with for a really long time. So they're members of the band. They are often in the touring band and often on the albums as well. So yeah, we're working on stuff one song at a time. It hasn't really coalesced into like some project, like a release or a full-length album or anything like that. But I think that, I kind of like the approach of, rather than like getting a batch of songs, working them all through, hitting the studio, recording them all in one go. Not that that's a bad process, but we have done that before. And I like the idea of kind of collecting and recording here, record a little bit here, like more of I love Neil Young's albums, and he does that a lot, where there's like, this song was recorded with an orchestra, and then this song is just like something that maybe he recorded at his ranch, and then there's like another one that they recorded in a studio, so it kind of takes you on a journey as you listen to the album, rather than kind of just being like, here's a different tune, everything else being kind of the same. So yeah, I don't know. It hasn't really fully taken shape, but we have been working on some original stuff, working on a lot of covers. And so, yeah, we're kind of stockpiling some stuff with really no clear idea of what it's going to become.
Well, I was going to also ask about the Patreon that the band launched in 2020 as well. Yeah. Presumably some of that stuff's going to be popping up on there, and what other sort of stuff have you been doing on there?
Yeah. So that's one of the motivations for recording these covers and some originals and stuff is just like have new stuff to share with the folks that are supporting us through Patreon. Kind of unearthing live recordings. We did a stream that was for the patrons. And what else have we been doing? We've been doing like just so I guess it's kind of like a podcast. So we just get together and talk. And then we share that with the folks that have signed up. So it's fun for us. It's a nice way for us to catch up and spend time together. And hopefully the folks that are listening to it are enjoying it as much as we are, or just enjoying it at all. Because I know we're enjoying it a lot. So yeah.
I'll make sure there's a link to it in the show notes and stuff for this as well. And then,
cool, thanks.
Then we'll invite people to email you and tell you how much they enjoy it and whether they enjoy it as much as you. So,
well, that would be great.
Awesome. So let's do some other people's music. So I sent over a list of like 10 to 15 potential categories. How easy was it for you to narrow down those categories, then narrow down within those categories into the albums?
Yeah, it was fun because I started just, thinking through all the stuff, and been listening to music and collecting music since I was real young boy. So, just kind of looking back on my life and music, and what was important to me, what kind of led, the initial kind of things that like kind of pointed me in one direction or the other. It was really fun to decide on which categories and then find specific albums in those categories. So
the first one we're going to go with then, as it always feels like a nice place to start, is the first albums that you ever purchased. And you've got two here. So you've got the first one you ever got on CD and the first one you ever got on vinyl. Can you tell us what the albums are?
So the first CD that I ever bought was from my friend. It was a copy of Stone Temple Pilots' Core, which is kind of, it's totally appropriate, honestly. I'm trying to figure out what exact year it was, but I was in 7th grade. I think I got a CD, like a Discman for my birthday. So I needed to put something in it.
So it wasn't a real copy either. It was one that your mate had just copied for you.
No, it wasn't. It was his copy. It was the actual, it was the album.
Okay.
And I guess he decided he didn't want it for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's a great album. I purchased that from him. And, the funny thing is actually, I gave him, I think it was like, $6 or something I gave him for the CD. But then I went to go play it and it was like there was no disc in the case. So then, later that day, I think I went to Kmart and it was like, I think it was my birthday or like that was kind of the occasion because I was getting a CD player and then, then there was a need for the CDs and stuff like that. So I got Candlebox. I can't remember the album, but it was like kind of the original Candlebox record. And then also, it's like it all happened like within a day. I owned the Core CD, didn't have it. I bought the Candlebox CD. It sounded really good, honestly, like on the Discman. Like it was definitely like made for that format. That Candlebox CD really rocked my world. It just sounded so good. The fidelity was so good. And then Vitology by Pearl Jam, my other friend gave me that the following day. It's a really good album. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I can still, and I still, out of those three, I think Vitology would be my favorite to this day. But, Core still holds a special place in my heart. And also like the following album, Purple, I'm a big fan of that. I am a fan of Stone Temple Pilots. So, I just want to get that out there. You heard it first.
You said that in a way that this feels like a bit of a confessional meeting now. It's...
Yeah, well, I think that there's they've been derided somewhat, probably for good reason. I don't know if there's a whole lot, I don't know if there's like a whole lot there as far as substance and like the lyrics and stuff, but just as far as like the music and, the delivery and it's heavy, but like kind of in like a mid-tempo way. And they explored some different genres too. Later on, there's this really great song, Lady Picture Show off of Tiny Music from the Vatican Workshop, or I might be getting the album slightly wrong there, but they're a good one. they're a good band. That I even actually, we were on tour one time. We had a layover at LAX, and we were trying to find some food, and our drummer was like, "That's Scott Weiland." I'm like, "What? No, it can't be." He's like, "No, I think that's him." And it just was a person there that was like not very impressive in any way. But I had to find out. So I was like, he was at the bar ordering a drink, and I just kind of like, he seemed somewhat unaware of his surroundings anyhow. So it wasn't that hard, but I kind of like looked over his shoulder as he was opening up his wallet to pay for it. And I read Scott Weiland right there on his ID. It was the man himself. And I didn't say anything to him, but he was there. And and it was pretty fun. I'm glad I saw him.
I listened to the Stone Temple Pilots album like yesterday, and I went through like a real like sort of grunge phase about 10-15 years ago. So I hadn't listened to the album for a real long time, and I'm gonna go exactly with what you said on this. Like, there may not be like the most substance in that album at all, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, well, there might be substance too, but it's really hard to understand exactly what the lyrics are getting at sometimes too. Yeah, but it is fun. It is a fun album for sure. I used to do the, like the intro, the "I am smelling like a rose that somebody gave me." I do that for a sound check pretty often. It's a fun one. Like usually you'll get, it's nice when you get like some haggard sound guy to like chuckle, and that one like kind of breaks the ice sometimes.
I really like that impression as well. I thought that sounded great.
Yeah, well, I've listened to a lot of Stone Temple Pilots.
And so, what was the first one on vinyl as well?
Oh yeah. So, and I think that was another situation where I think maybe I bought the record before I had a record player, or maybe I had a record player and then I brought it home to play the record and found out that the record player didn't work. But it's Dead Kennedys' Plastic Surgery Disasters, which, yeah, the album cover is just like super harsh. It has like this emaciated hand and this other bigger hand. I don't know. It's very disturbing in a lot of ways. Which, I mean,
it's photoed by Michael Wells called Hands, and it's a proper iconic but really grotesque cover.
Yeah, I mean, which is Dead Kennedys. I guess that's kind of shock is sort of what they're going for.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this one, I think it was like my older brother got me into a lot of music, and I think that he had recommended this particular album to me. And yeah, it's intense and awesome. And yeah, some of my favorite tunes on it are what was the one? Forest Fire is fucking great. Moon Over Marin is great. Terminal Preppy. Yeah, I mean, it's just mean and cynical and funny and yeah, really great introduction to punk rock. My dad liked it. My mom fucking hated it. Not because my mom's like super uptight about people singing about like punk rock and curse words and stuff like that. It was really more just like she found Jello Biafra's voice to be like super offensive. And that's fair.
What sort of stuff did your parents listen to then?
Well, I guess that one kind of could like be a transition to talking about Graceland, which was probably the album I listened to the most in my life, would be Paul Simon's Graceland. I remember listening to that a lot when I was a kid. They also had Talking Heads Stop Making Sense was a popular record at our house. Willie Nelson's Stardust was really popular. I think there was a lot of other just like really familiar rock stuff, like Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. But also, my dad was a jazz musician, so I remember in particular, he really liked Birdland by Weather Report. Was a really common song in our household growing up. And then just, yeah, a lot of stuff that I can't quite pinpoint that, they would listen to, but I never like connected that with a particular album.
What age did you start playing then? You said that your dad was a jazz musician.
I started playing like right around 7th grade, back when, got my CD player and stuff. 7th grade is a really big year. I think I started skateboarding a lot at that point too. There's just like a lot of things changed for me. So, but like, before that, there were always instruments around the house. So like there was a time when I was younger where I was asking my dad how to play guitar. I wanted to like learn this Metallica riff, and like Forever I May Roam. I don't know if that's actually the name of the song, but it's on the Black album. But he taught me like the intro riff, and I was like, okay, cool. Like guitar's easy and this is fun. And then like immediately after that, he's like, okay, cool. And like, this is how you play a bar chord, which is, you have to use all your fingers. It's just like a really challenging position to like hold your hand into and like to get the notes to ring out. So like I was like encouraged, and then just like immediately after that, like super discouraged, like, well, if playing a bar chord is what I need to do to play guitar, then I'm not going to play guitar. So that was when I was younger, but I think it was like 7th grade. A few of my friends had guitars, and, my parents being musicians, my dad had a bass at the house. And so my friends were like, hey, does your dad have a bass? I'm like, I don't know what a bass is exactly. I'll go ask him. And he's like, yeah, here you go. And then started playing with my friends, and I've been playing ever since.
Well, I was going to ask about those early bands, because there's always either a we were a band but never actually played story, or there's a we were a band and we had a terrible band name story as well.
well, all of that. So the first band that was actually a band was me, my friend Nick, and our other friend Angela played drums. So Nick played guitar, she played drums, I played bass. We were called Free Delivery. And then none of us wanted to sing because, it's terrifying to sing. So we'd ask another friend, Travis, to sing in the band. And he was not good, but he was willing. So that was, better than the rest of us. But he ended up getting suspended from school. So we actually were able, they let us play like 3 songs at the dance in like 8th grade or something. And he got suspended from school like the day before the dance, so he couldn't go to the dance. So I think Nick might have sung a little bit. I know I sung some. We did a really extended version of Pipeline, which is like an old surf tune. But that was it. Free Delivery. I don't know if we played any other shows. But later on, me and Nick met up with some other folks. We had another band called the Substandards in high school. And lots of goofy bands with goofy names and mediocre music.
That's the story of, I'm going to say pretty much every high school band is exactly that. But I can definitely speak from experience of terrible high school bands playing terrible versions of terrible songs. It's they're sort of memories you repress slightly, and then people come on here and I ask them about it, which is always nice. So with the Paul Simon album, Graceland, as you said, this is like the album you've heard more than any other album. Like, what is it that keeps you coming back to this album?
Well, like I said, it was an album that my parents would play a lot when I was a kid. It was really common in the household. So there's the familiarity part to it. But also, I've done a little bit of research on it, and it's kind of questionable how it all came to be. Like, I don't know if Paul Simon was actually like really great about giving people credit that kind of made the albums what they were. But I think that's also kind of what makes it great, is like the collaborators on this album are just like phenomenal musicians. Los Lobos were one of the backing bands on this album. Obviously, Ladysmith, Black Mambaza. Linda Ronstadt does vocals on the album. There's just like tons of people that contributed, and that's what makes it great, though. It's like Paul Simon. I know his name is on the front and everything, but I'd say he's really more of just like the person that connected all these musicians. More of like a curator than like a songwriter even. And there's like if you do a little bit of research Steve Berlin from Los Lobos has like serious beef with Paul Simon about basically stealing one of their songs and like releasing it on Graceland and being like, hey, look at this, these guys backed me up on this song that I wrote. And they're like, what the fuck? That's our song. But yeah, I mean, it's a good album. It's just I think that I think it does have good lyrics too, and it sounds awesome. And it, like I said, it kind of takes you on a trip. Like there are different types of songs. Obviously influences. There's stuff like Zydeco type stuff. A lot of like African music is also a part of it. And American roots. It's all there.
I was really glad when you sent this album over because like I'm really new to this album. So I listened to it for the first time 12 months ago, which is ridiculous.
Oh,
wow. So it was just before I turned 30, I did like this bucket list thing when I was like, okay, I'm going to do 30 things. And one of the things on that list was I'm going to listen to these 30 classic albums that I'd never listened to. So like I went trawling through the internet and finding like the 100 greatest albums of all time type lists and pulling stuff out of there that I'd never got around to listening to. And this was on there. So like, I'm still like early stages of listening to this album, which is great. It's really weird discovering an album like this that everyone else apparently knows really well. But I did, there was some terrible stuff. Well, there's some brilliant stuff on there, terrible that I'd never listened to it. Like Blonde on Blonde was on there, and like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and like This Year's Model, which has just become one of my favorite albums ever. And it was like a really fun thing to be able to do because I was trying to find stuff that I wouldn't normally listen to as well. So it's a really long way of asking, do you think there's like many classic albums that you've never listened to, and are you willing to admit any of them?
Well, that one that you just mentioned there, I'm actually not even sure what it is. Dark Twisted Fantasy. See, I mean, it's probably embarrassing.
It's Kanye West album.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any classic. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that you just see and they're just familiar, but you don't necessarily know what's on it. I'm trying to think of some examples because I'm always, just with Spotify nowadays, you can just go and find out about all those things that you never bothered, because you used to have to like invest a lot of money to get them or whatever. And now you can just listen to whatever, whenever.
I was talking to a friend about this not too long ago, and they were saying, sort of in that same vein, they were saying, "Oh, I've never listened to Dark Side of the Moon," and someone else in the conversation said they'd never listened to Rubber Soul, and you were just like, I was coming to this conclusion. I think everyone has this sort of missing spot from their music knowledge, and they don't quite know about it, but I might be wrong on that. And you've listened to all of the best albums that everyone should listen to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty out there. It's just it really is overwhelming the amount of music that is available, especially nowadays. Like you can get it all so easily that you kind of take it for granted. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think that there's a lot of albums that like I know that I'm supposed to like that I've listened to, and I just like don't get it. I think like Blonde on Blonde. I bought that because you're supposed to, and you're supposed to love it, and I may love it someday, but and I still listen to it occasionally. It just doesn't really get me immediately. I really like this album New Morning by Bob Dylan. That's like kind of my go-to lately, and I like Bob Dylan a lot. But I don't know. I'll have to think of some of the other ones. But definitely heard all the Beatles albums, and I'm going through Pink Floyd. Definitely heard Dark Side of the Moon, but now I've been going through like from the beginning, trying to listen to every single album a few times and get familiar because they have just a lot of really incredible material.
I think they're one of those bands that've got more music than maybe sort of casual audiences are aware of. Yeah,
for sure. And like the different eras too, like the really early stuff with Syd Barrett is really fascinating.
Yeah, completely agree, definitely. Okay, so we're going to move on to a different category. We're going to go for Best Difficult Second Album, which is actually a new question, and you're the first person I sent it to as an option, so I'm excited for this. Can you tell us what you've gone for?
So yeah, I went for More Specials by the Specials, and they're just a band I keep on going back to. I like a lot of like the two-tone bands. Like I'm a big fan of Madness and the Specials and the English Beat. And I wasn't even sure. Like I had to double check on this one because like I know that they released a lot of singles. I had a collection of their stuff, and then the Specials is their first album that was produced by Elvis Costello actually.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
And yeah, this one's weird. Like they were, really great ska band, and then they put out this album that isn't really that. It's got "Enjoy Yourself" as like the first track, which is awesome. It's just like a really fun kind of dance number, but also like pretty foreboding. It's later than you think, and it just like kind of goes in like these weird dark places and explores a lot of different genres. It's like one of those albums where like an artist kind of is like kind of staying in their lane for a while, and then like you get familiar with that stuff, and that's your go-to when you listen to them. But then you're like, you want to get their weird album. Like, come on, I know this stuff too well. Just give me something bizarre, because I like this band, I like their sensibilities, but I want to see like what happens when they like push the limits. And I feel like that's what this album is. And I was doing a little bit of research on it. I guess who was it? I'm trying to remember. One of the members, I think the keyboard player,
Jerry
Dahmers. Yeah. He produced it, and he was kind of going for like easy listening music was kind of like the inspiration behind the album. So like, yeah, just to like frame this cool like dancey ska band and then like reframe it as like easy listening and music, like yeah, just kind of took a compelling turn. And it's got guests, like some of the Go-Go's are on it, doing backup vocals, and I believe it's Rhoda Dakar is doing vocals as well. So it's just all over the place. Really fun album.
Yeah, it's a really fun album, and like it's one of those ones where it shouldn't really work, but it really does. It was only released like 12 months, I think it was, after the debut album. The band had just been touring relentlessly, and then they just went into the studio and came up with this, which is like a really bold statement of, we're not just a ska band. There's all this other bit going on about it as well. I really, really like this album. I really like Specials anyway. Like this, like it almost defines that sort of difficult second album bit, in that the band just hated each other by this point, and like half the band left like 12 months after this album was released, I think.
Yeah. It's one of those albums that kind of sounds like it would break up a band.
I think it's very fractured, isn't it? And like, and it's and it does, like you say, it swings from that like Enjoy Yourself sort of big happy number at the beginning, and then it's got some sort of slower and sadder bits, and then like it goes into like Holiday Fortnight and stuff. Yeah, it's a really great album. And it's sort of, because the Special sort of stopped there. I know they released stuff after that. I mean, I don't think Ghost Town was even on this, was it? I think that came later, but
yeah, it did come, I think, soon after. And they're a band again, but like the original lineup, I think, hasn't really. I don't think the original lineup is reformed.
No, because they had an album out like 2 years ago, I think it was, which was just 3 of them. It's actually, it's a pretty good album. It's a pretty good album to listen to. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but Encore, I think it's called, maybe.
Okay.
And that's quite fun to listen to, but you never quite got all of the members back together to do another album after this. And like, it's really interesting how the dynamic inside of that band, with sort of Jerry trying to pull one way and sort of Neville trying to pull the other way, and everyone else just sort of pulling their own direction and being really tired and like just trying to put something together. And it sort of creates this brilliant mess. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking back to this performance I saw. I think it was a old Grey Whistle test. Maybe I had a collection.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, what an incredible band. They're just like all the elements when they were working. They were an amazing band.
Yeah, the videos from the old Grey Whistle test are so good as well. I mean, it was a TV show. I'm sure they must have done it a few times, but there's a couple of videos that I've seen on floating around on YouTube which are really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they sort of they reformed, and most of them were sort of there about 10 years ago in the UK, I think it was, but I never got around to seeing them, sadly. I've seen individual members, and I've seen, stuff that was going on at the same time in terms of madness and things like that, but I've never got to see the special show up, unfortunately.
Yeah, they were a good one.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, like, this category is difficult second album. So that idea of a difficult second album, I guess, how much truth do you think there is in that in general?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I'm glad that you came up with that category. It's something that me and my friends talk about a lot, because in a way, you're spending all the time leading up to your debut album, writing your debut album.
Yeah.
It's just the culmination of everything you've been thinking of. I mean, maybe you played in other projects and stuff, but like, you have time. There's no pressure for that first album, typically, But if you do, if things go well and people really, your first album is well received, then there's like immediately pressure. So not only do you have like not much time, but then everyone's like definitely going to be comparing it to the first one. That's just like unavoidable. I think that it's just kind of like maybe pulling off a Band-Aid. You just got to do it, just like as quickly as you can. Like, don't even let people build up expectations. Just get it out and do it. Just try to get it out of the way so you can start actually really like focusing on your third album. I think a great example, and a really great second album is Joyce Manor. I can't remember the name of it. Of All Things, I'll Soon Grow Tired or something like that. I think that might be what it's called. Which is a great one because they're just like, to me, that's just like a masterful second album where they're just like, we're going to get it done. We're going to crank it out. There's great stuff on it. I think it's a great album too, but like, they're like, we're not going to do what you expect. Are you going to be with us? Are you going to stick with us or not? Like, it's kind of on you. We did the second album. Okay, now we can all move on.
So how does that like process change then after you get past the second album and you get on to album number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6? Like, how does that, like, that writing process and that the expectation put on you as a band must change quite a lot over that time? Does it get easier?
Yeah, it can. It all depends on. Well, a lot of it depends on how you approach it too. I think that there are different ways to do it. You can write an album and it goes well, and then you can try to relive that magic and do it the same way and try to like kind of keep the template somewhat the same as far as like the type of songs, or you can try to switch it up. I feel like there's a quote from David Bowie, something about like walking out into like a body of water, like the ocean, and like you kind of like are sure-footed when you first start getting in, but a little bit deeper, then all of a sudden like you're touching the ground, but then when a wave comes, like you're off the ground, and like you're kind of in like this, on unstable ground somewhat, and like that's kind of like an interesting place to be creatively, is to be challenged and uncomfortable a little bit. So it all depends on how you want to do it. I think that it's more fun and interesting for the band, at least, to try to challenge yourself or be uncomfortable. I think maybe the fans, might not always appreciate the results, but that's the thing too, is like, there has to be a balance of like, well, there doesn't have to be a balance, but there can be a balance in the band being fulfilled and the audience being fulfilled. But it can go both ways. Obviously it can just be all done to accommodate the band's whims, and it can be all done to accommodate the, what the fans think they want. But yeah, I think with most things there's a good balance, and I find it most rewarding to kind of be slightly uncomfortable during the creative process, just like, I don't know, new and fun things can pop out in those moments.
Okay, so next up, we're going to go for favorite soundtrack. What have you gone for?
I have gone for The Crow original motion picture soundtrack. So this movie was just huge. 94 is when it came out. So I guess that would have put me at 11. Is that right? 83, 94.
Is this going to be 7th grade again?
I guess a little bit earlier. It must have been. I think it's about that time though. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I was listening to it a lot in 7th grade. Probably 6th grade as well. But yeah, it really is a who's who of like early 90s dark alternative and kind of grunge stuff. It's great. Yeah. I'm just going to list off, for those of you who are not familiar, the lineup includes The Cure. I don't actually know all these bands. Machines of Loving Grace. There are a few that I wasn't familiar with, but you got Stone Temple Pilots, Nine Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine, Violent Femmes, which is cool. A little bit of a throwback to like an 80s band. Rollins Band, Helmet, Pantera, For Love Not Lisa. This song, My Love with After the Flesh, My Love with Thrill Kill Cult. That song fucking rocked my world. I remember like the scene in the movie, and I think the band was actually in the movie. You know, it was like a band performing in like some seedy club. But then Jesus and Mary Chain, Medicine, Jane Siberry. But yeah, it's great. It's got some covers, a lot of unreleased material. The movie itself too, just like was huge. It was just like the right amount of like action, because I was totally into comic books and music, and like it's like kind of a gothy comic. Great soundtrack, dark, sketchy. Had like there's also like the lead actor Brandon Lee died during the filming of the movie, so it also kind of has like this weird there's this weird kind of
like a macabre to it, isn't there?
Yeah, there's like kind of a legend sort of behind it. It's like larger than life in a way.
This was a complete blind spot for me. I'd never seen this film, and I still haven't. It will go on the list of films to watch, which is getting ever longer. But the only thing I knew about this film was that he died during the making of it. He got shot accidentally, was it?
Yeah, I think it was like a blank. You know, like when there was a gun with a blank in it, but something malfunctioned and was actually hurt, was injured by it, and then there was some complications. Yeah, I mean, I read this a little bit ago, so there were some complications during the surgery that came afterwards. Yeah, I haven't actually seen this movie in probably a decade or more, so I can't necessarily. I think it might. I'm crossing my fingers that it'll hold up, but I've been disappointed in the past. But yeah, I mean, when I watched it when I was younger, just like the whole package was there, and it was incredible. Surprisingly, yeah, I don't think I ever went as the Crow for Halloween, which is odd. I guess maybe I just gotten too cool and grown up by that point to like dress up for Halloween or something.
Are you a big film person in general then?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I do. I like a good film, but I can't. I'm not really good at talking shop. Other folks in the band are, I listen. They talk about all the movies, but I do enjoy watching a movie, and I try to make time for it. But I think, music's a little bit easier to find time for because you can do other things while you're listening.
It's one of those things that I think at the start of COVID, I was like, oh yeah, I'll sit down and watch all these movies that I should have always watched, and increasingly found myself not able to actually concentrate on anything longer than about 15 minutes on the screen before I'm doom scrolling through Twitter again. So,
put that phone down.
Yeah.
Lock it up and watch the movie. I think that would be good for everyone.
I gave the soundtrack to this a listen earlier. There's sort of a YouTube playlist of all the tracks that are on there and stuff, and it's got a lot of it's from what I know of this film and from the aesthetic of this film, I can see how pretty much all of this fits in. Like it's the Pantera track on there's great, and it's sort of very dark and heavy as a film. Like it's really cool. It's got some great stuff on there. Like I'm a fan of the Rollins Band, and the Cure are amazing. So yeah, it was all good stuff.
Yeah, and this is I was familiar with the Rollins Band version of Ghost Rider, and this is actually a cover of the Suicide Song, which you wouldn't. I mean, if you heard the two back to back, you would never assume that it's the same song, but they sure are. And I think maybe this Pantera song is like a Poison Idea cover, and yeah, great Violent Femmes song, which like a huge fan of their early material, but this is like the mid '90s, so I was like a little bit after their heyday. But yeah, good tune. I think this was originally like Big Empty, the Stone Temple Pilots song. I think later appeared on Purple, but this is a really, really great song.
I really like soundtracks in general because you normally get like a good sort of mix of bands on there, and it's normally like quite a nice way to find some new stuff that you weren't necessarily aware of anyway. Like there's been quite a few bands I've found just off back of soundtracks and stuff. Are you a big soundtrack listener or?
Yeah, once again, like, I've certainly watched movies and heard songs and been like, oh, okay, what is that song? Or shows as well. I can't think of a lot of soundtracks this is like, when I read the question, I was like, just immediately The Crow soundtrack. This is the one. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like I'm kind of into the popular soundtracks. Pulp Fiction, I think, is a great soundtrack. Yeah, I especially love how they intersplice like dialogue from the movie in that. I'm trying to think of some other soundtracks. Having a hard time. Oh, Bodyguard soundtrack. Big fan of that one.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of Whitney Houston, which is great.
The Blues Brothers soundtrack is my favorite soundtrack. That's always right up there.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Which is something which has come up on here a couple of times, and people don't need to hear me talk about it anymore, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, what are some of the other ones? They might ring a bell. What are some of the other soundtracks that you think about a lot or that come up on the podcast?
It's a lot of there's a lot of movie ones. So the American Pie soundtrack is one which, when I've sort of casually had this conversation with people, it's come up because that's sort of, I'm early 30s, so a lot of skate punk, a lot of skate punk bands which I got into were on those terrible early noughties teen films. So that was like a lot of the stuff which came through for me there. Anything by all the Tarantino soundtracks, like Reservoir Dogs is, you mentioned Pulp Fiction. Reservoir Dogs is brilliant as well. Oh,
Brother Where Art Thou was a great soundtrack too.
Yep.
I definitely listened to that one a ton. Speaking of the early 90s, or like the 90s, like teen films and stuff too, Clueless is
okay, yeah.
It has this Muffs song on it, which I was really surprised. I'm a big fan of the band. My wife got me into them years ago, and I just like keep on getting deeper and deeper. They're great. But I was really surprised to see the Muffs, like checking their number, like on Spotify or something, like their top tracks, and putting it together that like they were, I think maybe like the first song on like the Clueless soundtrack or something,
right?
Which is huge.
Yeah.
For a band like that.
It was. I was chatting with a guy called Jed who hosts the Talking Records podcast, and he was telling me about soundtrack for a film called Angus, which is another one of those like early 90s teen comedy things, but that's got loads of great stuff on there. It's got lots of like early Green Day and Weezer and stuff like that on there as well.
Oh, yeah. I remember a lot of people talking about the Angus soundtrack. There was also Airheads was a really good soundtrack too, kind of from the same era. And a lot of my friends also talk about the Judgment Night soundtrack, which I remember the film. I never had the soundtrack though.
I don't think I've even heard of the film.
It's great. Once again, I remember it being a really great film. But it might not stand up. Emilio Estevez, Dennis Leary. The premise is that these guys are like trying to go to either like a boxing match or like maybe it's like part of like a bachelor party or something. Just like some dudes are together and they're in traffic. And they're like, okay, let's turn off, like take a shortcut. And then like they go to the wrong part of town and they witness something. And then like, it's like this fucking gangster guy is like chasing these guys through like this dilapidated part of some city. And it's like the soundtrack is known for like kind of a lot of the I think maybe there was even like a lot of collaborations between like rap and like hard rock bands. So it was like sort of like this one of like the first like instances of like kind of like new metal rap rock stuff. So like it was groundbreaking in that respect.
I will definitely find that, because that sounds, yeah. It feels like it was probably going to be, if it's lots of collaborations between sort of different artists like that, it feels like it's probably going to be something that I downloaded off LimeWire in sort of 2001 and sort of the Anthrax Bring the Noise type stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go for the last category, which is your favorite live album. Can you tell us what the album is?
Yes, I can. I might get the full title a little bit wrong, but so it's this artist Todd Snider, and it's live at Grimey's, which is a record store in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's just an in-store performance that Todd Snider did. And Todd Snider is an excellent songwriter, and these are some of my favorite of his songs. But it's one of these artists where, you know, their best performances are just them and an acoustic guitar. I don't really listen to Todd Snider's albums because like they're kind of a little bit, there's too much production going on, and like the intimacy and like he's just like a really kind of like charming individual, and that comes across when he's like, you know, in the middle of songs. Sometimes he'll just like, you know, mention a little thing, like it's all just kind of like off the cuff, and his intros to the songs and the stories that he tells about the songs being developed and stuff. And there's like, you know, one song where he has like starts playing it and he's like, oh, I fucked it up, and like has to restart the song, you know. So it's just like, it's just really endearing in that way. And yeah, I feel like there's another live record that's a little bit easier to find called like Stories and Hotel Rooms. Can't remember the name of it. It's got like either like a blue or a purple background, which is also really good. But this one in particular, just the collection of songs. And
well, I didn't know Todd Snider, and so you sent this over to me, and you sent this particular like live in-store thing over to me via Dropbox, and I played it like 3 times in a row. He's so endearing as a person. Like,
yeah,
he's like, musically he's really good, and like his voice, I really like his voice, but that sort of connection he has between songs, and him just being able to like make those stupid jokes between it, and like you instantly like him. It's really good. I really, really loved it, and I've spent a lot of the last few days listening to his other live stuff, which is loads of it up on various YouTube channels and stuff. But yeah, he seems like a really interesting guy as well. I haven't been able to get that much on him, but he seems like someone who gets himself in a lot of trouble, I feel.
Yeah, he certainly seems like he gets into a lot of trouble. Maybe less now. I'd hope. But yeah, I saw him probably 10 years ago now. This really cool spot in, I guess it's in Phoenix. Well, it's in the bigger Phoenix metro area. Maybe it's technically in Scottsdale, but it's called the Musical Instrument Museum, and they have a nice hall, and it's a really cool performance space that's kind of got sloped seating, so everyone has a pretty good view. But yeah, he was just there with an acoustic guitar. I don't think he was wearing shoes. He played a set, and then he said, you know, if there's anything you want to hear, just like write it down on a piece of paper and leave it on the stage, and I'll probably play it for the next set. So just like really down to earth guy. Our friend David J was the one that recommended Todd Snider, and it was actually, we were on tour, and Sean, like, I think we went to Amoeba Records or something, and he just like bought all the Todd Snider live stuff that they had on the shelf, and this was one that he bought, and I you know, had it on my computer ever since. And I hadn't actually listened. Actually, no, it was on an old hard drive, and it was just recently that I was going through the hard drive, and out of all that old music, like, this is the one that I zeroed in on. I'm like, oh yeah, that album. Haven't listened to that in a while. And I listened to it, and it's, yeah, just incredible. You know, it really holds up.
I'm assuming the recording's from about 2006-ish, because it's tracks from the album The Devil You Know, which was released in 2006. So it feels like one of those like in-store promoting the record type shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got there's a song about George W. Bush on there. So yeah, it kind of dates it a little bit. But yeah, great songwriter. Check out all the live stuff. And we used to cover Old Times. That was a song that used to kind of be like a nightly thing in our repertoire. Great tune.
Was there any other live albums that you would have considered for this one? Are you a big live albums person?
Yeah, I am. There was one that I wanted to mention that's not an album, but there's a Nina Simone performance live at Montreux, the Jazz Festival, which is excellent. I'm a big fan of James Brown live at the Apollo. Is a great
classic
live album. Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison is great. Also, the banter is the thing that just like so great about live albums. Trying to see, just what the whole performance is about. Playing songs is one thing, but like all the other stuff in between is it's cool to see how different people approach that. And obviously like James Brown just has like the most killer band that just like just rips between the songs. What other live albums are there? There's so many good ones. I recently picked up Neil Young's. I think it's like Tonight's the Night, but it's like live at the Roxy. So it's like it's like from that era, which is a really good one. I mean, what other? Yeah, can't think of any others off the top of my head right now.
There's a few sort of unplugged albums and stuff, which I always go back to. I mean, obviously Nirvana Unplugged just being one of the ones that's always there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
There's 400 different live Bowie records that are out there that you can get, and they're really interesting records to listen to as well. I'm trying to think who else I've doing. I just had one in my head, but it's gone. No, it's gone. It's not coming back, I'm afraid.
It happens.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. I think that's our albums.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. Like, so many great records there, and for anyone listening, they'll be down in the show notes, so you don't have to go back and try and figure out where we were saying things. We'll put them all down the bottom. Where can people find you and people find the band on the internet?
Yeah, there's probably like an AJJtheband.com thing, and then obviously we're doing the Patreon, so that's a really great way to support us these days. And we're working on stuff. I'm sure we'll have all sorts of fun, exciting things to share with you soon.
Amazing, thank you. And links to your socials and the website and the Patreon, all of that will be in the show notes as well. Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. Thank you, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
So there we go. That was my chat with Ben. As I said at the beginning, Ben was an absolutely great guest. I'm very, very happy he agreed to come on. He was super knowledgeable. He was very funny. He was just really friendly and nice. And hopefully he'll be back on at some point in the future as well. So I've just finished editing this back, and I realized about halfway through when we're talking about the specials, I say that I've never seen the specials, and it's true, I have never seen the specials. But as I was editing, I remembered that I do actually have tickets to see the specials. It's one of the shows that was meant to happen last year. It's now happening this year. So yeah, I get to see the sort of current incarnation of the specials in September, which should be great. I'm excited for that. Also, when speaking about soundtracks, you would have heard me mention Jed from the Talking Records podcast. He has an absolutely great podcast where he goes in depth on classic albums. Where possible as well, he gets the artists who are involved in the albums to come on and talk about it as well and answer questions. Absolutely brilliant. You should go and listen to it. At the end of last week's episode, I mentioned that it was Thursday night, and I said that I was going to try and edit this week's episode ahead of time, so I wouldn't be editing on sort of the day before it comes out and doing it sort of tired and slightly stressed. I obviously completely failed to do that, and it is obviously now Thursday night again. But I'll try again next week. One day I will manage to edit an episode of this podcast with more than sort of 2 hours before it's due to be released at the other end. So that's it. That's the end of the show. The only thing that's left for me to do is ask that if you enjoyed it, if you could subscribe, If you could rate, if you could share us with your friends, if you could do post about us on social media, that would be lovely. You can contact me on social media. I am at vinyl__tap on Instagram, at It's Record Time on Twitter, or you can search It's Record Time on Facebook, and I should pop up on there as well. Alternatively, you can just email me on itsrecordtimepodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, just to say hi. I like it when people just say hi. You can do that. So all of that information I've just said, plus the albums that we spoke about, plus links to AJJ's socials, is all in the show notes. So check that out as well. But that's it from me. I'm going to go, and I'll see you all again next week. Bye.